When the ground stops shaking, silence often feels heavier than the rumble that came before it. When everything you built lies in ruins, time itself seems to hesitate, unsure whether to move forward or stay frozen in disbelief. And when you realize that the life you knew, your home, your street, your neighborhood is gone, survival becomes not only about food and shelter, but about rebuilding the invisible structure of hope. The story of life after a massive earthquake begins not with noise, but with quiet. In that quiet, you hear the sound of loss, the breath of the survivors, and the faint heartbeat of resilience. When the dust settles, the first light of dawn doesn't feel like victory. It feels like a test. Buildings can be reconstructed with concrete and steel, but the human spirit needs something less tangible, yet infinitely harder to restore. Faith that tomorrow is worth fighting for. In the immediate aftermath, survivors often describe an eerie stillness. The streets that once bustled with movement are filled with rubble and memories. Familiar landmarks are gone, replaced by twisted metal, broken glass, and the smell of dust and smoke. People move slowly like ghosts through what used to be their lives. The first challenge is survival, finding water, warmth, and safety. But the greater challenge, one that will last years, is emotional endurance. Every aftershock is not just a tremor of the earth, but a trigger for fear, a reminder of what was lost. For many, the disaster doesn't end when the shaking stops. It begins then. Hospitals overflow, electricity is gone, and communication lines are down. The thin fabric of modern life unravels. Families are separated, sometimes permanently. The lucky ones gather in makeshift camps, clutching photographs and fragments of their former lives. Others dig through ruins, hoping to find something, someone, before the machines arrive to clear what's left. Hope and despair coexist in the same space, divided by inches of concrete. Days turn into weeks. Aid begins to arrive. International teams, food, tents, medicine. But coordination is chaos. Governments struggle to manage logistics, and survivors begin to realize that the system meant to protect them is as fragile as the ground beneath their feet. Small acts of humanity become the only functioning system. A stranger sharing water, a nurse improvising a clinic, a child finding laughter amid wreckage. These moments, though fleeting, form the first fragile threads of recovery. In psychological terms, survivors go through three overlapping phases: shock, adaptation, and reconstruction. The shock phase is paralyzing. The brain cannot process the enormity of loss. Many describe it as a dreamlike haze, where emotion is suspended. Adaptation comes next, not out of choice, but necessity. You learn to sleep on the ground, cook with scraps, and live without comfort. Reconstruction, the hardest phase, means facing the truth that the world has changed permanently. It's when you begin to decide whether to rebuild or to rebuild. Communities that once seemed ordinary become symbols of endurance. In every earthquake-stricken city, whether it's Kathmandu, Port-au-Prince, or Fukushima, there's always a neighborhood that refuses to die. People set up informal schools for children in tents. Artists paint murals on cracked walls. Religious leaders hold services under the open sky. These acts aren't about optimism, they're about defiance, the refusal to let tragedy have the last word. The resilience of these communities becomes the beating heart of a nation's recovery. Yet beneath this collective courage lies a quieter pain. Post-traumatic stress disorder is rampant among survivors, especially children. The sound of a door slamming can send someone running for safety. Many suffer from survivors' guilt, why they lived when others didn't. Counselors describe it as a second earthquake, one that shakes the mind long after the ground stops. In many countries, mental health support lags far behind physical reconstruction, leaving invisible wounds untreated. Economically, the impact is devastating. Entire industries vanish overnight. Factories collapse, ports are damaged, roads are severed. The poor, already living on the edge, are pushed into deeper vulnerability. Insurance rarely covers the loss of livelihoods. Informal workers, who form the backbone of many economies, find themselves with nothing but bare hands and broken dreams. Governments announce ambitious rebuilding plans, but corruption, bureaucracy, and lack of resources slow everything down. Years later, many families still live in temporary housing that was never meant to be permanent. But amid despair, there are moments that redefine what humanity means. In every disaster, stories emerge, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. A man who carries strangers to safety on his back, a woman who opens her surviving bakery to feed hundreds for free, children forming small search teams to look for missing pets. These stories remind us that even when structures fall, values can stand tall. Compassion, it turns out, is the most unbreakable material in existence. Technology, too, becomes a quiet hero in recovery. Drones map the destruction, helping rescuers locate survivors. Satellite imagery aids reconstruction planning. Social media, once dismissed as trivial, becomes a lifeline, connecting families, coordinating relief, and broadcasting the truth from ground zero. Crowdfunding campaigns raise millions for displaced families, bypassing traditional barriers. For the first time in history, digital empathy becomes as powerful as physical aid. As months pass, a strange duality emerges. On one side, you see cranes and concrete, the visible rebuilding of infrastructure. On the other, you see eyes that still reflect loss, the invisible rebuilding of souls. Streets are repaved, but memories are not. Psychologists call it collective trauma, a shared scar that becomes part of a nation's identity. Japan's post-2011 earthquake recovery showed that physical reconstruction can be achieved in a decade, but emotional healing may take generations. There's also the question of identity. When you lose everything, who are you? Many survivors find new meaning in community service, volunteering, or advocacy. Some move away, unable to bear the memories. Others stay, determined to rebuild not only their homes, but also the story of their land. In this process, loss transforms into purpose. Cities rise again, not as replicas of the past, but as living memorials to resilience. For some, though, recovery is a luxury they cannot afford. In rural areas or poorer countries, reconstruction is slow or incomplete. Temporary shelters decay over time. Promises from officials fade as new crises take over headlines. These forgotten survivors continue their quiet struggle, often relying on faith more than assistance. In their world, hope is not a feeling, it's a daily decision. Each sunrise is another opportunity to keep going. Children are often the most symbolic victims and survivors of earthquakes. They adapt faster than adults, yet carry the deepest emotional scars. Teachers play a crucial role in restoring normalcy, teaching under tarps, using scraps as books, turning lessons into therapy. Education becomes more than learning, it becomes healing. Decades later, many of these children become engineers, doctors, or social workers dedicated to disaster resilience. The earthquake, though tragic, becomes the seed of their purpose. Religion and spirituality also play a profound role. In the aftermath, churches, temples, and mosques transform into both shelters and sanctuaries. People gather to pray, not always for miracles, but for strength to endure. Faith leaders remind communities that even when the earth trembles, their faith can stand firm. Rituals of mourning become rituals of rebuilding. Across cultures, belief becomes architecture for the soul, a structure that cannot collapse. Global response to earthquakes has evolved, but challenges remain. International aid brings expertise and resources, yet sometimes imposes solutions that don't fit local realities. True recovery happens when rebuilding is led by those who lived through it. The phrase "build back better" only works when it includes "listen first." The most successful recoveries are not the fastest or the richest. They are the most human-centered, rooted in dignity and local wisdom. In the long term, the question is not just how to rebuild, but how to prepare for the next one. Seismic safety regulations, early warning systems, and education programs have saved countless lives. Still, many cities remain unprepared, either due to poverty or political neglect. Scientists can predict risks, but not always convince policymakers to act. The tragedy, then, is often not in nature's violence, but in humanity's forgetfulness. Yet, even after the worst destruction, life finds a way. Plants sprout through cracks in the pavement, markets reopen amid ruins, couples marry in tents, births are celebrated, the rhythm of life resumes, uninvited but unstoppable. This resilience doesn't erase pain, it coexists with it. Survivors learn that strength isn't about never breaking, it's about continuing despite being broken. An old proverb says, "The bamboo that bends is stronger than the oak that resists." Earthquake survivors embody that truth. Years later, memorials stand where buildings once did. Names etched in stone remind future generations of what was lost and what was learned. Earthquakes teach us humility, that no technology, wealth, or power can fully control nature. But they also teach unity. that in moments of greatest vulnerability, humanity rediscovers its shared core. The Earth shakes, but compassion steadies us. For those who've lived through it, normal life never truly returns. It transforms. Rain sounds like safety again. The smell of food cooking in a rebuilt kitchen feels like victory. A child's laughter echoes through a new home, and suddenly the future seems possible. Pain becomes memory, and memory becomes strength. The journey from rubble to renewal is not linear, but every step forward is sacred. And so, the story of life after losing everything in an earthquake is not just about tragedy. It's about rediscovering what cannot be destroyed. It's about realizing that home is not walls, but people. That safety is not the absence of danger, but the presence of love. That the human spirit, though fragile, is the one structure the earth can never bring down. If this story moved you, remember, every act of awareness is a form of rebuilding. Every share spreads the understanding that recovery is possible. Subscribe to Crisis Lens, like this video, and share it to help others see the strength that rises from the rubble.